you and I are huge fans of marketplaces and the ecosystems and the softwares that it takes to make them successful. So I think, from my perspective, I don't think this is something where we've seen the end of the evolution. And I think we're only at the beginning.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing great. So we have Jessica now on the podcast. Jessica, how are you doing today?
Great.
Yeah, really happy to have you here. Really also, you have a very strong experience on the platform economy. So I guess it's going to be very interesting for our audience today to hear from you, to have plenty of insights. So I hope everybody has notes ready to be able to keep up with Jessica. So, Jessica, maybe the audience might not know you at the moment. So why don't you introduce yourself and explain a little bit of your diverse experience in the platform economy?
Sure. So my experience started when I joined Anatwine, which is a UK company. And as you may know, Paul, we worked with the likes of Adidas and Nike and Under Armour back then to integrate them primarily into Zalando, but to many marketplaces. We were eventually acquired by Zalando, at which point I was recruited by Zalando to join their burgeoning marketplace team to run integrations. And then later I ran the sports marketing vertical in Zalando Marketing Solutions, where we were optimizing brand performance on Zalando. So very sort of Zalando focused for a while. I then returned to the UK in sort of the newly merged Anatwine Trade-Bite organization. So there I kind of overhauled the CS team to post-merger to bring the two companies together. And I also ran the Trade-Bite sales team. And then about a year and a half ago, or almost 2 years, I moved to Miracle, which is the leading fixed price marketplace platform in the world. And I ran the sales organization here in the UK and Nordics. And I've also, over the last sort of 12 years now, worked for a wide variety of retail tech companies and retailers in the United States, Germany, Australia, in the UK.
All right, sounds good. And what do you like particularly about this platform economy? Because now it's been 6 years. Then 6 years, if I'm calculating correctly. 6 years that you're in this industry of marketplaces, dropship models, etc. So what do you like about it?
I think a couple of years ago I did sort of an analysis of what job would be ideal for me, and I think at the end of the day, the thing that is the most important is stock. Where is stock sitting? How does that stock get to the end customer? And I think marketplaces have emerged as one of the slickest ways to get stock from point A to point B. So from my perspective, it's been one of the most engaging technologies and ecosystems that's evolved, over for me, what's been a 25-year career. And it's, constantly exciting, constantly changing. And I'm really passionate about the value that it brings, both to, the operators of marketplaces, but also to the end customers, which I think at the end of the day is who all of us need to keep happy.
I think everybody benefits from this platform economy when it's done right. At least everybody, every single actor of this economy is commission based, and also you have the customer that benefits from an extended choice. So of course everybody should be happy about the emergence of the model. So maybe moving on then to your current role at NovaFori. So you're vice president of sales. Can you tell us what is NovaFori? And because you mentioned you worked at Miracle, and maybe doing a little bit of a parallel, or to understand how NovaFori create marketplaces. That would be good, because it's a fairly new solution in a way compared to some other actors that are there for a bit longer.
Yes, I agree. So yes, my Miracle background has been really useful, and especially I think Miracle excels in the exchange of fixed prices. To position NovaFori slightly differently. So we were founded in the UK, and originally what we started to do was create the experience of an auction online. So for high-end goods like Christie's, for instance, where the consumers are global, so they can be bidding from anywhere, and we want and need those bidders to have the sort of experience that you would have if you were live in a Christie's auction. So we started kind of with the simplest form of auction, which is eBay style. So, one bidder, does a bid, someone bids higher, and the prices keep going up. But since then, we've evolved. So we have a lot of different auction models where you may want multiple rounds of pricing exchanges between the buyer and the seller. And you may also have a product that it's difficult to price. So, where that fixed price model doesn't work, different auction models or different sort of negotiation and trading models may be more relevant. So we've expanded globally into many other verticals. So not just fashion and retail, but also carbon credits, automobiles, and even actually dairy. And we have offices currently in the UK and Spain. So in general, we do sort of offer a different proposition to those sort of very singular fixed price marketplace platforms. And our goal is to connect buyers and sellers and to support them with that sort of price discovery, finding the right price in a more dynamic pricing environment via auction and other trading models than they might get in a fixed marketplace platform.
All right, so NovaFori basically adjusts the offer to the demand based on an auction marketplace, compared to Miracle, where it's going to be fixed price, and then wherever there is demand from the customer, then products get bought. Whereas like your like customer are basically making the price. So is it also, do you have like maybe the ambition to move on then to other type of goods, which can be like, I don't know, like sort of primary goods like cereals or things like that, like food and raw items that maybe, while the price also varies because like there's trading behind? Or is it for the moment more on transformed goods and that you want to operate with NovaFori?
So I think that we can do both B2C or B2B. And I would say, well, we wouldn't call it like trading or a commodities sort of thing. We can work with non-traditional products and sort of take on an unlimited number of characteristics of those products. So if you're selling, you mentioned food earlier. So there's a lot of detail around, food, like where it was grown, whether or not it has certain certifications. So all of that data is supported by the platform. And yes, I think there's a huge opportunity. Again, a lot of those markets are working on paper or via email, and definitely not via an optimized marketplace platform. So yes, effectively, like if you want to sell something, we can find a way for you to sell it.
Because when we think simply of B2B process, like sales process, we think about like negotiation, we think about like supply meeting the demand. So in that case, then the auction model is more interesting in that way for the customers, for all parties involved.
Yes, and I mean, there's sort of the like bidding up that creates a lot of excitement, but there's also opportunities to do things like sealed bid, where all the bidders put in their bid, and then at the end, someone opens them up and says, this is the winner because they're the highest, and you get a much more honest price in some of those cases. So again, it's a great option where, even the people selling the product may not have an idea really of how much that product might be worth.
So, well, for our podcast, then now that we have like the idea of NovaFori, then for sure for our podcast, we're just gonna focus on the vertical, on the fashion one, and that's also like your the core of your knowledge, and where you can guide like people the best, the audience the best. You mentioned earlier eBay, so the eBay model.
Yeah.
How really it evolved, because eBay was created in 1995. How did it evolve now that we're in 2024? Based on that, well, nearly in 2024, as you can see, like with the Christmas tree. So how did that evolve since 20 years ago, and how does NovaFori make it an elevated experience?
So I would say 2 decades of experience also means a couple of things. So one, tech debt. And so, whether it's eBay or, old procurement systems or someone that popped up a marketplace or an auction in the 90s, the same issues plague them that plague Amazon. So there's an abundance of choice. Sometimes there's poor imagery, there's poor customer experience, there's lack of a special focus on a product or a vertical or a customer. So I think one of the benefits of a new platform like NovaFori is, you and I talked earlier about, customer experience, user experience, usability. So I think creating a modular solution that allows you to sort of plug all these models together, whether it's like, e-com plus marketplace plus auctions, means that would have been unachievable 10 years ago. So, if you're building on top of old systems, you're not rethinking the way that they all should be put together if you were to start from scratch. And I think that's the benefit of using a platform like NovaFori.
And you mentioned also something that, every customer is thinking about when thinking about eBay and auction model. I think that also eBay is trying to implement some steps for that, is about like the content that is being created by sellers, which is often like not up to standards. Let's put it that way. So what eBay is currently doing is investing in AI, trying to have also like, third parties consignment systems where they will create the product pages for you in order to make it also like appealing for the customers. So how do you handle that? Like on NovaFori side, how do you make sure that the luxury fashion products are being are being sold like in a with a great content in that way?
Yeah. So, I agree with you. I think it was rather kind of you to say like maybe the imagery isn't the best. That's, probably being very kind, considering, even on some incredibly high-end, sites like Vestiaire Collective, et cetera, a lot of these things are just sort of like a dress hung on the back of a door. And that's not a compelling customer experience, especially if, a similar dress of a similar pattern in the current collection is being sold on the Prime website of that brand for, 4 and 5 times the price. So I think, one, there's an incredible benefit in auction platforms investing in, either shooting the imagery themselves or partnering with someone that knows how to produce and present a luxury product appropriately. What I would say is that, at this point, there is a lot of general consumer awareness about these different sites and these collections, whether it's Vestiaire Collective or even eBay to sell secondhand products. I think, the way that the imagery is produced and the way that things are validated. So there are a couple of different technologies that we use. So one thing that we do is we plug into custom CRM systems, custom KYC systems. So sometimes it's not even about the seller, but it's also about whether or not you want that buyer to be able to bid on a product, whether or not they're validated, which is quite common in luxury, right? Like there are some people that are on the like Chanel block list. So I think, there's sort of a two-sided integration process whereby good content can be plugged in, and that can either be generated by the platform themselves. But I think there's a huge opportunity now, especially in luxury, to actually validate that those products are real. Because right now, they may sell, Vampire's Wife may sell a beautiful brand new dress, and a year from now, a woman may want to resell it. But his Vampire's Wife validated that that's a legitimate Vampire's Wife product. And quite often the imagery or the presentation of the product may make the customer feel like it's a risky buy, which means you're not getting an optimized price. And you're definitely, back to your original point, not getting an optimized customer experience. So I would say there's a benefit of adding in validation systems, especially for higher price points, back to that imagery and that customer experience, investing in that. And our platform can integrate to any of those. And we do integrate to a lot of custom, CRM systems or KYC systems to make sure that is met on both ends, that validation process.
So let's say that like then like a customer has a luxury item to sell in a C2C platform. So how is the validation then that the product is an authentic one, like working? Like, is it based on a given identifier that has been provided? Because if I remember correctly, I think you use then third parties as well, like in order to validate that. So how does that work really, like to make sure that customers is really getting, because we have a lot of people that are shopping on Vinted, and we talked about it earlier. It's emerging like crazy, but everybody's getting like also counterfeit items. So how do you ensure that that the items are the real ones with a NovaFori?
So I think it depends on the customer. I think, Christie's is an example of like where they leverage like experts in, particular niches of antiques or things like that. I think if you're talking about luxury fashion brands, like, the best person to validate whether or not a Chanel bag is real is going to be Chanel. So what I would say is that a lot of these platforms have teams in-house, but I would say inevitably, especially if you've got an existing brand where there's a good secondhand market, the best positioned company to validate that product is the brand. So a really great example of that recently is Watchfinder. So there's a huge secondhand, market for watches, and seeing them take that back and take the control back, like validate the watch, shoot the imagery the way that they want that product to look, is an incredible value, because they're optimizing the revenue. They're making sure that their brand value isn't deteriorated by the experience. So I would say those are examples of like where generally I would recommend the brand, or they bring experts in-house in the way that Christie's does to validate those products.
That's what we see right now. It's that on the current platforms that are, I mean, we talked about Vinted, but eBay as well, is that when you want to sell a luxury item, you don't have a luxury service. You don't have a luxury elements behind it, on the side of it. So you feel that actually like you're buying the same thing from €5 to 5,000 is the same sort of experience.
Yeah.
So I think that it's very important, as you mentioned, to have like the in-house capabilities to be able to handle that superior service, because actually like you cannot make it like a luxury website or luxury marketplace without having the capabilities of doing it.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
And so then moving forward into into the fashion business case, we see that that there's a lot of marketplaces that have been created, and the market is, I mean, pretty dense in that way, because when we think about like the main fashion retailers, Zalando, ASOS, any retailer actually like we can think of that is major, is either selling on marketplaces or having a marketplace. So how do you see that evolving in the future? Because they already have a marketplace. Do you see eventually like a need for them to switch marketplace provider? Maybe to use NovaFori as a more of a niche marketplace provider for luxury section of their website. How do you see that really evolving? Do you see that that retailers will use multiple solutions in order to list products in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it will depend on the business. So, if we use Zalando, for example, they're not currently, and I know that they're continuing to try to build up the sort of luxury premium part of the business. But, generally your sort of actionable PDP with a fixed price works really well. But, if you think about an eBay model, they'll very often have like, the rising price, but they'll have a buy it now button. And, in our business, we call that a fixed price model. So the benefit of NovaFori is you can run an auction model and you can run a fixed price model on the same platform. So in some cases, some items lend themselves more to being sold in that way. That, automobiles, for instance, I know it's away from fashion, but that's a great example of like where you may want to add the competitiveness of bidding, but you always want to sell it when you can at a price that you hit whatever margins you need to make it worth your while. So I do think, I mean, it's interesting because, you mentioned are we already to the replatforming state of marketplaces? And at least so far in my experience, we haven't seen that yet. But I will say, we've started to see the replatforming of integrators. And I think that's the first wave of that. There were those early adopters like Adidas. They got on board, we did whatever it took to get them live. It wasn't always pretty. But what I would say is like the more evolved businesses get and the more they understand their data, where it's coming from, and whether or not there's a simpler, cheaper, more optimized way to do business, I do think that we'll start to see switching. And if I think about, the question you were asking about, how do I see it evolving? I would kind of look at it I'd give you three answers. So the first that I thought about was the pandemic really gave us an understanding of like how tenuous the supply chain that supports fashion is, and how easily that can change. And that the fact that pricing is never able to really fluctuate based on those changes, I think is a risk. And I think fixed price marketplaces, and only the fact that, as like usually you can only change that price once per day. And even then, you don't change it unless there's a sale. So it's pretty limiting in terms of reacting to market demand and that sort of thing. And you've got such a long lead time for fashion lines. Third party, like these fixed price marketplaces, don't solve every problem. And I would think about, for instance, like the rise of like hot drops and limited collection. There's such a proliferation of resale on these products now. I think brands are missing out on revenue that's then being processed via these non-branded sites. And that's taking control from the brand and potentially eroding trust with their core customer, because like you said, they could end up with a counterfeit product. They could end up with a poor customer experience. And it also cuts off the relationship between them and the end customer, because it's the reseller that is having the end relationship with the customer. So I would argue that there still isn't great protection for this. And especially for like the resellers and robots. And you may have seen Zalando recently announce that certain products would only be available to a limited customer group. But because they developed that internally instead of outsourcing to a software provider, it's taken over 5 years for that to come to fruition. So we were trying to figure out back in like 5 years ago how to protect Yeezy from, bots and everybody else. And that was when it needed protection as a product. And there was no good solution. And that was even at Zalando, who you already mentioned is like one of the biggest in Europe. So I do think how to deal with that resale market and the end-to-end, like the relationship with the customer, is something brands should think about protecting. And I think the final thing, and this is, you saw me talk a lot about this in the webinar, but sustainability and corporate responsibility are becoming key elements in consumer choice. So customer preference can drive good behavior and it can drive bad behavior. So it drove the rise of fast fashion and brands sinking to the sort of lowest common denominator in supply chains with, human slave labor and unsustainable raw material. But now consumer tastes are changing. So I think the younger generation wants more transparency in the supply chain, and they're willing to buy secondhand, and they want to make more responsible buying decisions. So I think this is why so many brands and retailers are offering secondhand items, but they're not all doing it well, which you said yourself earlier. So I think the demand is there, but the industry needs to find a way to do it better, because they need to protect their brand, both for the new articles and for that secondhand or resale market, so that they're not losing valuable revenue to those who don't protect or position their brand in the way that they would like. And I mean, it used to be discounting, right? We were so focused on like, we don't want discounting. We don't want the discount level. And I think secondhand is like the new layer of that now brands need to think about how to protect that. So I know that was a long answer, but I legitimately think that all of those things are the way that we're going to see marketplaces and that relationship evolve.
Hey, stopping the podcast here for a moment, as I have just released a free course on how to launch and optimize a marketplace. It is designed for marketplace operators, but I'm sure that any marketplace professional, sellers, integrators, solutions, or consultants will receive lots of insights. If you're interested by getting best practices from more than 30 marketplaces, go on feedelitist.com/free course to get your copy. You can also find the link in the description. Without further ado, let's resume the podcast. Enjoy.
And I mean, you mentioned the incentive for sellers, and I will say, I mean, having worked with Zalando for a long time, you look at the relationship Zalando had with sellers 10 years ago, it's very different now. And, they demand a lot of sellers. And what I would also say, same of Amazon, like, how much you have to spend on advertising. And so that's also where some of these smaller marketplaces can come in, and maybe customers are also shopping there. And there is not this weight on the sellers that there is to trade on these big marketplaces where the cost of entry, connection, and maintenance is so high, is a part of their cost of business. So I agree with you on, is there really a motivation for some sellers? There may not be in some cases.
Yeah, exactly. Like I feel that, I mean, so far, like also like on marketplaces, it's driven by operators, but now like there's also going to be like a choice, like plenty of choice, like for sellers to choose the right fit.
Yeah.
So I believe that like what was super one-sided before, as in the collaboration between sellers and operators, well, operators were like just like, okay, we're gonna kick you out of the platform if you don't do this or don't do that. But it still works currently, but like you mentioned Zalando, while Zalando has so much competition right now, they are still like number one. Don't get me wrong, like in Europe, like in fashion, but who knows? Like in 3-4 years, like sellers literally like really don't like working with Zalando, not because of the team, not because of really the people that are there, but more because of the efficiency that is lacking, and the one-sided collaboration. So yeah.
Well, and I mean, if we talk about, all of the questions you were asking earlier around like technology and optimization, and when you look at these sort of like in-house legacy systems that have not evolved with the times, it's a great example of that. Because, if you're a seller and you put your stock into a ZFS warehouse, it's not ever coming out of there. It's either going to sell on Zalando or it's never going to come out of there. So I mean, I do think that flexibility in the supply chain, and there are a lot of things that will begin to become more important that aren't all Zalando focused. So I agree with you.
And maybe also that's why, like, because of the not issues, but because of the lock-in like factors of ZFS, maybe that's why like they created Zios in a way.
Yeah.
To maybe expand it also, because like sellers cannot retrieve, you're not gonna like get your stock into like Zalando warehouses and get it back because it's so expensive to do it. So you're really like stuck in a sort of prison where you're gonna pay in both ends. When it's like when you want to get your stock back, you pay per stock, but still when it doesn't sell, you pay per day. So it's like, the model is.
I mean, it's genius from a Zalando perspective, absolutely genius. But yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I think we're currently seeing two controversial like tendencies that are completely opposite. Actually, it's the rise of fast fashion as the fastest it could ever go with Shein and Temu in that way, and as you mentioned, the emergence of secondhand commerce. And I think that actually what I just think about Zalando and those platforms, etc., is just some of them already understood that they're never going to be able to compete and to be the fastest as per Shein, and they see that they will be losing ground over time, and therefore they are thinking about going more and more into mid-market and going more like into luxury items progressively. And that's probably like also what we've seen with Zalando. I mean, with Zalando, like maybe going in and really, I don't know if it's been like 5 years, maybe not, but like that maybe not like the what they wanted to do. But I think that eventually Zalando would also have to change a little bit of their positioning, and same thing as most of the platforms, because they would not be able to compete anytime soon with Shein. Therefore, the speaking about like that feature that they developed, like about like the sending to a friend or something like that, like be able to do that. It's also a sort of workaround. It's sort of a way to admit that like the anti-botting system is really difficult to put in place, because ideally you want everybody to access a product page. You want everybody to be able to shop it. If you have like a strong anti-bot system, you do that. And as you mentioned, then, well, let everybody shop it. Let everybody shop it. Let the price like rise up, and then it's even better for the brand to be able to just get like the benefit from it, and then it can eventually lead up to because that it's always like the problem, like as a brand, you know, like when you're like, okay, we have like we have a limited edition, but we have like a X number of products, but then you already know that you're going to sell out, and you already know what is going to be the profitability. Whilst here, it can be like you can just have a few reference like to sell 10 products, but if like the bidding system goes like super high, it can be like actually the most profitable sale of the year. So I feel that's where like also auction marketplace is really, really powerful for brands, into like making sure that you really like create like specific drops, and you don't need to multiply the stock because you don't want to be greedy, and you want still like your limited editions to be limited.
And they end up, I would argue, they end up in the hands of your real consumer. So you're continuing to develop that good relationship with who your real end consumer is, which I think is the most important for, you know, brands like Adidas and Nike, is, you know, that relationship they have with their customer.
Exactly. Well, I'm not sure they're going to wear it, but but definitely, like it will not be in the hand of resellers, or resellers that will have like even a higher bid. But if you let people like bidding at first, then resale wouldn't make much sense in that way. So we spoke about like the benefits of NovaFori on this. Maybe can you either remind us, or just explore other elements on how NovaFori would be then different than other SaaS marketplace creation platforms? So we talked about Miracle, but Miracle is not the only one. There's plenty of them, and you can find them actually. Like, I'm doing self promotion. You can find them in the Miro board that I created about like marketplace SaaS solutions. How do you differentiate yourself? I mean, the auction part is a very strong differentiator, but do you have also other things where you're specifically proud of about the SaaS solution that you have?
So, I mean, obviously the term that I would use, and this is kind of the way that we've described it at Miracle, but that we offer a new version of dynamic pricing. So the idea that a product has only one price, and during its life cycle, it only changes a couple of times, is so simple. And the exchange of pricing between a buyer seller is more complicated. And that's why we don't see a lot of players in the space, because it's not as simple, right? So you're right. There's a lot of, you know, companies like Miracle and Marketplacer, but we don't see any of them moving to sort of accommodate a model where the pricing isn't so simple, and that you can accommodate a lot of price changes, you know, within a day, or like within even, you know, minutes or seconds. So I would say one of the most common reasons we get approached is, one, because someone built like a proof of concept. Would this work for our business? And I mean, we've already talked about the drawbacks of build it yourself. But I think what they've seen is that it's not scalable. So investing in like an enterprise software that enables scale, so that you can pop up that MVP, and maybe it's a simple model, and then you add more on over time, so that your platform doesn't crash at peak moments, is really important, especially in retail. So, I mean, to give an example, when we were doing a Beeple's auction for Christie's, there were millions of people watching it, and the platform held up. And we know, you know, retail kind of goes through these peaks and troughs. So building something that's like modular, you don't have to buy everything out of the box. You can sort of add on as your business grows and develops, I would say is probably one of the most compelling things about where we fit into the market. So that dynamic pricing, and also that modular element to the business.
Yeah, because there are still plenty of operators that are creating themselves like their marketplace model, and going like in-house, not using like any solution, which is challenging, but still doable. Like for if you have a fixed price model, but like then adding like all those features and being able to make sure that they handle like the volume, it's something else.
Yeah.
So definitely this is like this is a true differentiator of NovaFori, also like compared to other platforms, which have also like good traits, but definitely not based on that, not specific to that auction part of commerce.
Yeah.
And now talking about the future goals for NovaFori. I talked with with marketplace integrators who mentioned like a lot about like their future plans and like different like AI implementations or even reporting. What are your current goals for NovaFori in the future? Whether those are strategic, technical, and of course like not too deep into strategic, because
Yeah.
we would have like probably your competitors listening to the podcast. So
Yeah.
what's going on what's planned for the future of NovaFori?
So what I would say is in our early days, we were really focused on sort of custom integrations for big customers. So it wasn't unlike, Anatwine and Adidas, back in 2015. But as time has gone by, we've used all of those use cases to develop an enterprise platform that solves and takes all the best of those custom integrations to create a base platform that you can add different auction models and modules over time. So I think making sure a global market knows there is a platform that can do all of these and we can handle all these types of auctions is really important, and that there's an option to handle dynamic pricing, because I don't think that's something that's widely being spoken about globally right now. So it's a huge goal for us to educate and get that out there. Sorry, excuse me. So, excuse me. Sorry, Paul.
No problem. But just to take back on what you said is that you're selling like also like a solution where people like have also like to be aware of your vision in the way that is like a future, like a more onto the future. So like also like maybe the sales cycle can take longer in that way, because like it's a model that is evolving and not already there.
Yes. Well, so I think that, again, what we're adopting right now is there's an educational process that needs to happen. I mean, 10 years ago, Miracle wasn't necessarily the go-to for marketplaces. So they've done the heavy lifting on the sort of like fixed price marketplace platform. What we're doing the heavy lifting now is on all of these other different models that you can exchange products in a marketplace. So we're going to be traveling around the world to a lot of events this year and focusing on an educational outreach strategy that is sort of verticalized to fit, the different types of products that can benefit, and which types of business we see the most benefit. And I think for me, I'd also love to see us creating better supply chains for the businesses that we're working with in more sustainable and circular business models. Because one, I think, especially for fashion, but also for other industries, it's very relevant right now. And almost everyone is thinking about how to do it. But the way that we do it is very different to just saying, okay, we're going to ship all of our products in a paper box now. And it's a cause that's really close to my heart. So I think, one, there's like the educational aspect of like what our platform does and what we offer to the evolving platform ecosystem. But there's also how is that so future proof, and how is it a better way for the future? And I think, again, that's close to my heart, and that's a huge goal for us in the next year.
All right, sounds good. So to summarize on this, I believe that Miracle, as you said, like has done like the heavy lifting of like basically reaching out to most of the retailers that can ever exist, and selling them the marketplace model in that way. And that now also like retailers might realize that over time they will need a specific marketplace SaaS solution that is tailored for their needs, and they will be, because there's also like I talked about like the competition between marketplace integrators, like for sure it's quite intense right now, like it's hard to differentiate, but it's gonna also the marketplace SaaS solution are also going to evolve. They are evolving over time. There's also like solutions for SMBs. There's enterprise solutions, but then there's going to be like over specialization in that way to make sure that every big business case gets addressed.
Yes, I agree.
Just I hope like everybody had the information that they wanted about like this podcast on NovaFori, but maybe just you can tell Jessica, you can tell us like about like the how can retailer contact you, and how they can get more details from that podcast, like how to move forward if they want to hear more about the marketplace auction model.
Sure. So if you check out our website at www.novafori.com, there's a contact us button. So we're happy to be contacted via that. You're also welcome to connect me via LinkedIn and ask for a meeting. So, we're happy to share all the benefits of the platform and also our unique positioning in the marketplace ecosystem with anyone that's interested.
All right, sounds good. So feel free to check the website, and of course, NovaFori is also quite active on LinkedIn. Have like lots of contents, lots of white paper that you can download there. So feel free to have a look, and there was for sure gonna be like a lot of information for you to get there. Okay, Jessica, do you have maybe a last word for the audience today, to either summarize or the discussion or anything you want to mention?
I think in terms of the discussion, it's obvious, you and I are huge fans of marketplaces and the ecosystems and the softwares that it takes to make them successful. So I think, from my perspective, I don't think this is something where we've seen the end of the evolution. And I think we're only at the beginning. And I think more and more businesses, fashion's going to evolve. And then I also think that more and more business are going to jump on the same train as fashion, much like we saw in the e-commerce revolution that we saw about a decade ago. So I definitely think it's a very exciting space right now, and that anyone that's running a business should be looking at whether or not there's the potential opportunity to apply a marketplace model to their business.
All right, sounds good. Thanks a lot for being a part of the podcast, Jessica. It was really nice to have you here. I'm just gonna close it off for now. So hope everybody liked the podcast and had like a lot of information. At least I did, so that's a great thing about it. I will see you next time. Next time I will also interview marketplace solutions. So feel free to leave a comment below, leave a like or a reaction if you are watching that on LinkedIn. And I will see you next time.